take it up to the departure end of the runway, then a left turn and a left downwind. Cessna over the threshold, coming up on the white dot, at or beyond the white dot, left turn first available. I got a high wind coming up on about a half-mile final, clear to land at or beyond. Traffic on the left base, you're following a Cessna down, low off your left. Square it up just a little bit, and then we're going to get you in. Start your descent, though. Start your descent on the base. Traffic on final, give me follow on base. Base traffic, start turning toward the numbers now. High wing coming up on quarter-mile final, take it all the way down to the green. Cessna taxiing on the green, expedite down to the next hard surface. Get me some speed, there you go, 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 go fast. This is going to be good. I got traffic on a mile final. You're following traffic ahead and to your right. High wing coming up on the threshold. Take it all the way down to the green dot.
5 Charlie Sierra, 2 mile final.
A mile final, turn north, and we're going to just make you, we're going to bring you back around. Jet traffic's coming up on about a mile and a half final. Runway 9 clear to land.
Okay, all right. Let's listen up, guys. If you're on final for runway 9, I want you to offset to the left. I got a jet that's landing on runway 9. The jet's cleared to land runway 9 if you can make it. If not, just continue straight ahead. It looks like you're going around for the jet. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, we had one right in front of us, sir.
Dragger. Let's see. What we got? A tricycle. Tricycle, put it down. Tricycle, put it down. Tricycle, put it down. Tail dragger. Down to the green dot, then a left turn. Short final here. You clear to land on 9 all the way to the white dot. Go down to the white dot. Find somebody to follow out here. Canard, just come to the runway, and I might have to just send you around. That'll be fine. And for the jet, you just want to stay in this pattern, or you want to go back out for an instrument approach?
Stay in a pattern, Charlie Sierra.
All right, just stay with me here for a minute. And my tail dragger, let's see, over the numbers, go down to the green. And Canard's going to have to go around. Canard, go around. Canard, go around. Canard, go around. And my high wing here over the runway, keep it airborne. Keep it airborne. You do not descend. Do not descend. You got a fast guy behind you. Do not descend. There you go. Keep it airborne. Keep it airborne. As soon as the guy behind you gets slowed down, I'm going to put you down. So keep it airborne. The one that just passed the white dot, make a left turn on the hard surface. All right, my high wing tail dragger, you can put it down now. You can put it down now. And Charlie Sierra, let me get you about a mile off. Let's see, Charlie Sierra, I lost. There you are. Make a left-hand turn. I'll try to resequence you here on the downwinds. We'll see how it looks. Short final, you're clear to land runway 9 on the white dot. Clear to land on the white dot. There you go. And the tricycle left on the hard surface and follow the flagman. Welcome. Thanks for being part of the show. And let's see, just find somebody to follow on the final. And as you get close to the runway, if it's not going to work, we're going to send you around and then try to resequence you. Now, who else got sent around that's not back on the downwind? The Canard?
Yeah, Canard.
All right, Canard, there's a Gulfstream up there that went around too. I just lost sight of him, but you're going to make kind of a left-hand turn and stay low. I think Charlie Sierra, what's your altitude?
3,200.
Okay, that'll be fine. Just maintain VFR. I don't know what else is up there above you. Probably most everybody's down here, so just make a left-hand turn. We'll try to get you back here.
Canard's got the jet in tight.
Okay, the RV, maybe an RV-10, whatever, you're on final. Keep your speed up and go all the way down to the, aim for the green dot for me. Actually, keep your speed up. There's a guy behind you. Aim for the green dot, and I'm sure that's plenty of room for you to land on runway 9. You're clear to land on runway 9. Number 2, you're going to go down to the white dot. Follow the white dot. Actually, you know what? That's 1,500 feet. You're going to land at the white dot. The spacing looks adequate here. 2 guys on final. You're kind of tight there. Keep each other in sight, and you're going to aim for the white dot. If it's not going to work, we'll come up with a plan B. We might have to send you around. The second guy behind you out there in about a 2-mile final. Are you slow enough to be able to follow that guy in front of you? You need to go around. Well, I probably shouldn't ask that because I had about 5 guys answer me, so I should know better than that after 35 years, you would think, right? All right, so let me see. The guy who's number 1, it's number 1. What kind of airplane is he? An RV type. All right, RV type. Keep it airborne for me. Keep it airborne. And I got a fast guy behind you. The number 2 guy over the trees there. Go ahead and put it down on the numbers. Put it down on the numbers. My first guy just coming up on the numbers at the over the grass at the numbers. I want you to keep it.
T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Hello. Hello.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. You'll notice that there's no Ian, as he's away in Italy at the Fly Raduno. So filling his seat is Annabelle Cook. Hello, Annabelle. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. And for me, it was Radu. No.
It was definitely no, wasn't it?
Sadly, yeah.
You've flown up north, haven't you? So
yeah, instead I've done a couple of day trips. So I've got overnight flew up to Elvington this morning. I'm doing an overnight in York today. So it's not quite L'Aquila, but it's pretty good.
And if you caught yesterday's 2-minute long live stream extra, where Ian popped in and accidentally ended the live stream, you'll be pleased to know that he's promised to remain a viewer only tonight, so as to cause any chaos, which is good news, as I've guessed, is one that I know a lot of you will be excited to hear from, because when it comes to being an expert on the Space Shuttle, there's few people with a knowledge of it like Paul Dye. Paul retired from NASA in 2013 as the longest-serving flight director in US history. So if you've got shuttle questions, he's your man. He'll be along later. But first, thanks to our sponsor, Sky Demon, here's Rob with a tip all about 3D mapping.
Hi, I'm Rob from Sky Demon, and here's another top tip.
Our aerial photography feature makes it easy to see what an unfamiliar airfield will look like from above. But if you've got Google Earth installed on your device, Sky Demon also offers a 3D view that allows for more detailed exploration. Tap the 3D button here, next to the one for aerial photography. Google Earth will then open and take you to the view down the approach. Here we can pan and rotate the view in full 3D to get a feel for the airfield layout and surrounding terrain. Having an idea in advance of how a particular approach should look can add an extra layer of reassurance for that crucial end stage of the flight.
For more information, check out our website, www.skydemon.aero.
We need flyer waistcoats.
Rob does a waistcoat really well, doesn't he?
He does a waistcoat.
Yeah, I've got to say that 3D mapping function is pretty useful.
Yeah, I have known about that.
No, that is genuinely, that is new to me.
I'm pretty sure that my iPad won't support that, given that it barely supported a map at all today.
Alan Patson said, I didn't know that one either. Weedy Plain Bloke says, I'm just hoping Ian's kept away from the buttons this evening after yesterday. Yes.
Stunt Ian here is not touching anything either.
No, Crispian reminds us of the favourite. And there was a famous quote yesterday. Ian said, how's it going? Dave and I said, we have it under control, but we hadn't accounted for his action.
Actually, back to waistcoats. That's one thing that Sky Demon and NASA have in common.
It is.
Well, just one of many.
Yeah.
That's a very nice jumper you're wearing, by the way, Johnny.
There we go. Spot the NASA geek. Fantastic. So no weather tonight, is there? Simon's on a week off. So all I can say is luckily it's looking quite nice and settled. So my top tip is look out the window. So Johnny, tell us about question of the week.
Yeah, so question of the week this week is, have you seen a space shuttle launch or recover, or for that matter, any space vehicle launch or recover? Because they are doing both at the moment. So let us know in the comments if you've seen any.
I have not. Has anyone here seen that? I'm sure Paul in the green room has gone, yep, seen loads.
Yeah, boring.
Yeah, I saw a Falcon 9 in November launch, and that was my first.
I would love to, of current spaceflight, I would love to see one of the SpaceX, the twin booster launch and recovery, because it just looks pure science fiction.
Yes.
I'm probably the only person.
Go, Dave.
I'm probably the only person here who actually saw the men land on the moon in 1969.
I was going to say, did you see Jules Verne go to the moon?
No, I was a kid, but I was there watching it on TV, fascinated by it. Fantastic.
Very good. David Eade says, yes, February 2000, I saw it. Pete Pengelly, it was loud. Ian Course, yes, Atlantis' second to last flight launch. Marcus, stop. It's not Fancy Hangar yet. Yes, shuttle from Florida. Very good. Annabelle, tell us about upcoming landing fees and Flyer Club stuff.
Yeah, so Fly Club members, £5 a month. Landing fees for this month, you still have a little bit of time left to use them, and you have the weather. So this month's free landings are Bodmin, Brayton, Peterborough, Simpson, and Causeway. And next month we have some nice ones. So we have Compton Abbas, which I believe it's the first time we've ever had that. We have Damins Hall, which we think is the closest GA airfield to central London. We have East Kirkby and Fishburn, and we have £5 off at Kitty Hawk. Now, my maths isn't very good, but £5 off at Kitty Hawk is your £5 membership for the month. So everything else is but a bonus.
Yeah.
Then we have the webinars as well. We had a fantastic webinar with Tony Crow. Was it last week? Yes, just last week on air-to-ground photography. Already talking to Tony about doing some kind of follow-up. That was that was a brilliant webinar. So if you missed that and you remember, you can get that on catch-up. And I'm talking to our Simon about doing something in July about summer weather. And there's a note here that says Wadswick Wednesday mugs. And I don't know if that means Ed and Ian.
That's a carryover and a reminder that if you're a Flyer Club member and you want to fly into Wadswick on a Wednesday, then when Ian and I do Skywstream from Wadswick on a Wednesday, let us know, come in, and you can claim your Flyer mugs. As two more people, Colin Wilkinson and Russ Pinder did yesterday, flew in and collected mugs 3 and 4. So yeah, so you can do that, but you've got to be a Fly Club member and you've got to come and visit us. So,
and let us know before you come.
Yeah, and PPR at Wadswick. So yeah, a couple more space things. Mark Albury says, I saw Endeavourland LAX on the back of a 747. Nick Orchard's probably got the best story though. I did from the air in a little Cessna with a Dulux dog in the back licking my neck.
Oh. Unhygienic, but nice.
Yeah, I know. News time, I feel.
Yes. Top story this week. You may remember the Icon A5. It's a stylish, sporty, two-seat amphibious aircraft. It was launched at Oshkosh in 2008 to much fanfare, and it looked great. But like a lot of new innovative aircraft, it's had a rocky ride. That means money, basically. Right now, Icon Aircraft is going through a bankruptcy court action. The company owes $170 million and has little chance of meeting that debt. And just today, there's a bit of breaking news. The bankruptcy court that's handling the case accepted a bid of $15.8 million for the assets of the company. The bid was from a so-called stalking horse. This is a company called SG Investment. It's linked to the company's largest shareholder in China. SG Investment had looked to be the winner right up until the last minute, when another bid, literally earlier this week, another bid was received from an American called Lyndon Blue, who's a co-owner of General Atomics, a US manufacturer of military hardware. The confusing bit for me is that a stalking horse is only meant to be the fallback. So if no one else bids, the stalking horse gets it. In this case, another better bid came along.
Yeah.
And also they said that the intellectual property, the IP, would remain in the US. So why not accept a bid? It sounds like this guy was reasonable. Runs a company in the US, involved in aviation to some extent.
Well, if you remember, if it's the same Lyndon Blue I'm thinking about, it's the guy who ran Scale Composites, isn't it, for a long time?
Oh, is it?
And headed up a bunch of stuff for Beach when Scale, I think, when there was an involvement there.
So he would have been an ideal candidate. Anyway, for some reason, the lawyers worked through the night earlier this week to swing it back towards SG Investment, and the deal was done and has been approved by the court. So why the rush? Why the rush to get it through so quickly? Apart from some other shenanigans going on in the background, as a court report makes it clear, Icon Aircraft is burning through cash at the rate of $750,000 a week.
Wow.
So the judge accepted a decision was needed pretty quickly. And that $15.8 million that is going to buy the assets may sound cheap for a company that has got a certified aircraft as well as a light sport aircraft. But clearly, the cash burn is unsustainable. They've got to make and sell 2 aircraft a week just to break even, which they're not doing. So
do we know
maybe there's a bit more to come on this.
Yeah, because obviously they had there were a whole lot of customers with small but what were refundable deposits, weren't there? So do we know what happened to them, or?
No, I don't know at the moment. I haven't seen the detail from the court, but I can't imagine they're going to get their money back.
Yeah,
because it's a bankruptcy court, and there are other creditors who
much further
come
up
first, if you like.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. See how that pans out. I did see something today that indicated they were going to be at Oshkosh, so hopefully they're.
Well, I mean, if they're continuing to manufacture, they still need to sell them, and it's I've never managed to get in one, but I've seen one fly. It's a really nicely made airplane.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've got some sad news, unfortunately. Charles Strasser, founder of the AOPA Strasser scheme, which enabled GA pilots to make emergency precautionary landings at more than 200 UK airports with all the fees waived, has died at the age of 97. Charles was the last Czech and Slovak World War II veteran living in the UK. He had been vice president of AOPA UK, former chairman of AOPA Channel Islands, and former president of the Flying Rotarians, and flew a Piper Seneca twin, having learnt to fly to enable him to travel around the UK for his photographic business. He was an active pilot up until 4 years ago, when he said he could no longer tick all the boxes during his medical. He settled in Jersey after selling his business when retiring, and that's really sad because that was quite a momentous thing, wasn't it? When that list came out and everyone was encouraged to join in with that. So
yes, yeah. I should just say that picture is courtesy of the Jersey Evening Post.
Okay, cool. Yeah, stuff.
Johnny, so flight training news. Air Baltic Pilot Academy, who are based in Latvia, they've signed a letter of intent for 3 EDA-40s, which we all had a look around at Aero Friedrichshafen a couple of months ago. The EDA-40s on course for certification next year, and it should be the first EASA electric aircraft in its category. So it's got an endurance at the moment of 74 minutes, including reserves, which means realistically for a flight training company, it's going to be limited to circuit flying. Basic empty weight of just over 1,100 kilos, 125 kilowatt Safran electric motor, and a fast charging system, which they also had on show at Aero, and they were saying it should take between 20 and 30 minutes to recharge a depleted battery. So interesting.
And and it had a lot of batteries in it. Everywhere you looked appeared to be, it's like underneath, in the cabin, behind the seats.
Yeah,
full of batteries. So
and from a distance, Aero with the kind of blue carpet, you didn't quite see the bulge underneath with the battery pack under the aircraft.
But it's a big pack.
Yeah,
but it's the future.
Yep.
We keep saying. Annabelle.
Yep, so I was going to wrap the news up. So back in January, Mike Wood's Mini Sport suffered an engine failure, leading him to have a very close encounter with a hedge. The whole incident was filmed from a wing-mounted camera that I believe he was actually doing. The flight was actually a test because he'd just got it for Christmas. So it was all filmed, and he has made the video available, and we are sharing it on the Flyer website. I had a quick look earlier today. It's about 20 minutes long, but it looks like it's been really nicely edited. And when I've got a bit of time, I'd like to sit and watch that all the way through. It looks like a really useful learning tool.
Yeah, and he's released his video. The AIB just published their report into the accident as well. So he's released his video as kind of a learning tool for other pilots. And regardless of the size of the aeroplane, seeing something like that documented and the thought process.
Yeah.
And the things that happen in a relatively short time is, it should be must watch for all pilots, really, because it's a reminder that sometimes when it goes wrong, you need to make some pretty quick decisions. So
it's good for him to be quite open about it and share that with everybody. And
yeah, definitely. The nice thing is we've whipped through the news really fast, and so that means.
Oh no! How are we going to fill the time?
Oh no! Luckily, we have a really great guest, as I mentioned earlier. So our guest tonight has over 40 years of aviation experience as an engineer, builder, and pilot. He retired from NASA in 2013 as the longest-serving flight director in U.S. history. His book, Shuttle Houston, is a revealing first-person account of the high-stakes work of mission control and the captivating story of the Space Shuttle program. He's also a multi-time home builder, former editor of Kitplanes magazine, and all-round nice bloke. So it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Dye. Paul, hello, welcome to the live stream. We'll make you big.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Really appreciate it.
Well, fantastic. As a start, can you introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us and them how you got to where you got to?
Well, it's an interesting story. I've always been fascinated by flying machines, and I really consider myself pretty much a pilot who ended up very, very fortunate to have an interesting part in the space program. I was flying when I was in high school and had a license, and ended up going to the University of Minnesota for an aeronautical engineering degree, and I was specializing in flight testing and aircraft design. And the company I thought I was going to work for, Blanca, went bankrupt about my junior year of college, and so I had to look for something else. And NASA was looking for co-op students at the time. They were starting to ramp back up, thinking about ramping up for the shuttle program, for the flight program. And I threw in an application, and they accepted me and put me in mission control because of my background in flying, and I was working my way through college as a professional diver. So they said, you're just what we want. You're used to putting your own little pink body on the line and making decisions in real time. So here's your headset, have a seat, and let's go fly. And it was an interesting 34 years at the agency.
Amazing. And I didn't realize about the Belonca thing, but how did you figure that Belonca was going to be your career before it went?
I'm from Minnesota, and Blanca was building Vikings about 100 miles up the road from where I grew up. So it was like, well, I really didn't. No offense to anybody from Wichita, but I really didn't want to live in Wichita with general aviation. And so Minnesotans tend to kind of stay close to home if they can, and I wasn't able to do that. But NASA was worthwhile. I mean, as we said, we had to put up with the heat, the hurricanes, mosquitoes, and humidity of the Gulf Coast, but we got to fly space shuttles, so there was some compensation.
Yeah. So you throw your hat in the ring for NASA, and what happens next?
Well, so they assigned me as a flight controller, and they said, "Perfect, you've got wings. You got a silk scarf and goggles and a leather helmet. You're just what we need. We're going to put you in charge of the Space Lab computer systems." The Space Lab was built by ESA, and so what they did was we make everybody multidisciplinary, and so I was a flight controller for the first few years for the Space Lab and the Space Lab instrument pointing system. And then after the Challenger accident, I was transferred back to the shuttle systems, and I was in charge of all the mechanical systems on the orbiter, the APUs and hydraulics, which give you the flight control, the landing gear, the hatches, the latches, the payload bay doors, the flight crew equipment, spacesuits, and things like that. So, and then after a few years of that, I was a section head and had a bunch of people working for me. It was fun. But I wasn't on console as much, and they said, "Hey, we need you to learn something about the Russian space systems." This was 1992, and I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, we're thinking we're going to start flying with the Russians to keep them funded so that their smart rocket scientists don't go off to build nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles for people we don't want them to do that for." This was after the breakup of the Soviet Union. And because I spent a lot of time working with the Russians, going back and forth, helping develop the initial shuttle flight to Mir, that set me up very well to be selected as a flight director. When you see mission control, you see a lot of people in the front room. Each one of those people has between 2 and 10 people working for them. But in the middle of the room, you have the flight director. If you saw the movie Apollo 13, the guy in the white vest and the crew cut, Gene Kranz, that's the flight director, and we have complete authority to take any action necessary for the safety of the crew and the success of the mission. and by any action that means any action that we can draw on any resource of the United States. And so I was selected as flight director in 1993, and loved the job. I loved putting things together and working in real time and training flight controllers and training astronauts and going and flying missions. So I stayed there. They tried to pry me out of the seat every once in a while and make me a center director or an associate administrator or something like that. And I said, no, I really enjoy putting on a headset and going to fly.
That's incredible. Yeah. So obviously in charge, going back, you being in charge of the, you say the mechanical systems of shuttle, that must be millions and millions and millions of parts.
It is, a typical, just take the hatch, for instance, which is just a very minor system for us, which had a whole variety of latches on it, and they had all these intricate components that connected and had to work, and so that the whole thing, all the latches around the edge would work when you turned the crank handle. The payload bay doors, of course, had gobs and gobs of latches and mechanisms and motors and gearboxes. My real enjoyment was in the landing gear, because when we lost the Challenger, we took a break for about 2.5 years. We weren't flying, and that gave us an opportunity to fix all the things that were wrong. Like the brakes were undersized, the tires really weren't built for the speed that we were landing at. The nose wheel steering flat out didn't work. It was basically free castering. And so we fixed all that stuff. And because we were fixing it, and we added the drag chute, which was a project of mine. And so I spent a lot of time test flying in the big simulators, a lot of these things, and developing the landing techniques and the responses to failures and the like. So I got a lot of stick time doing that. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. So we've got a photo of landing. Please tell me that you managed to leave NASA with a parachute. That would be great.
I wish I did, but I have an awful lot of things in my boxes that flew in space because they tend to be really good little presentos and mementos. But nothing as big as a drag chute.
As a drag chute.
Yeah.
We'll come to the memorabilia a little bit later, because I noticed Johnny's put on the sheet something about that.
Yeah.
So obviously shuttle, from the moment of launch, what's going on? In fact, what's the build up to the launch for you and getting to that moment of
well, it might surprise people, but in Houston, we're responsible from the moment the explosive bolts fire and release the solid rocket motors until we've touched down, stopped, and on the runway, and we've got cooling reestablished. In between those times, which is the majority of the shuttle's life, it's the responsibility of the Cape. So during countdown, we're on console in Houston and we're following everything, but it's the Cape that makes their decisions. Now they ask us whether we're go for launch, and if we're not go for launch, we tell them and they don't launch. But and we're in charge of making sure the go no go for weather and things like that. But you're kind of in a situation where you're on standby until they actually throw the thing into the air and give it to us. And in the old days, you'd hear the call tower clear, because that's when Houston would take over. But the Cape realized that once they blew the explosive bolts, they had no communication with it anymore, and there was nothing they could do. And if it drifted into the tower, they didn't want it to be their fault, so they made it Houston's problem from the moment of liftoff. But you've got tens of thousands of parts that all have to work in perfect sequence, and everything has to be in temperature and pressure and the like. So it was always a little miracle when you got the T0 and you go, wow, we're actually flying. Oh, we better take this thing and go, because you kind of were in a scrub mode a lot of the time.
And you talk about the whole, closeness to the tower. I know that always seems like it should only go one way, but I guess there is a lot of risk that the first few seconds.
The engines are really, really working hard. The engine thrust vector control, they're steering around like this to make darn sure, take a pencil and balance it on your fingertip, and you realize that's kind of the way it works. And so the truth of the matter is the computers are flying it. And although we trained for thousands of hours in the simulators to fly it, to hand fly it, and if you were good enough, you could do that, we never hand flew it on ascent. Too many things could go wrong way too quickly.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to step in with a question, if I may.
Yes,
The shuttle as a concept, it worked so well. I've heard people describe it as a pickup truck that could just take a lot of stuff into low Earth orbit. What's your view on the shuttle as a concept?
Oh, I thought the shuttle was amazing. Of course, it was a winged vehicle, so to me it was the fastest, highest flying airplane ever built, and I loved flying it. I think I loved having the capability of the shuttle, not just to bring large payloads into space. You can do that with rockets, with disposables, but it's harder to bring large things back, and the shuttle was good at that. And so that's the capability that we lost. You have to realize that in essence, the shuttle was a delivery truck. It was designed to bring things to orbit, to build a space station, and then to service that space station. And that's what we did with it until it was retired. And if we still had it, we could be bringing a lot larger things back and large things up. The part of the problem with it, we flew it for 30 years, and although in the aviation world, where we're still flying Cessna 152s, 172s that were designed 60 years ago or built 60 years ago, in the general world, that's over a generation, and people won't drive a 30-year-old car unless they put antique license plates on it. So there was a lot. We were always hoping for the next generation winged vehicles, what we were hoping for, because we loved flying those.
And I've heard you talk before about how, in terms of the recovery of the shuttle, it was flown manually because you wanted the guys on the stick to be flying it from the very first moment, so they weren't surprised if there was an automation failure or something like that. So what did crews have to do before the shuttle launched in order to get themselves current with actually flying an airplane?
Yeah, so our pilots, our pilot astronauts were all as a rule, military test pilots, because that's how you fill out your resume in order to get there. And some of them had left the military and then came back as civilians. But you would do a couple of years of basic training, and you flew T-38s 15 hours a month. So you got a lot. You stayed current with high performance aircraft that can fall out of the sky at 10,000 feet a minute. Then we had all the simulators. We had a variety of motion-based simulators, fixed and motion-based simulators. And then you do a lot of hours flying a modified Gulfstream 2 shuttle training aircraft, which had the left side of the cockpit configured like a shuttle. The right side was configured as a Gulfstream, so that you'd have the safety pilot who flew it up. And then it was modified with spoilers and speed brakes and thrust reversers, so that you put the flaps out, put the spoilers out, put the thrust reversers out, go to 80% on the motors with the main gear out, and it would come down about as steep as the shuttle would come down, which is about 10,000 feet a minute. And you'd fly approach and approach after that to groove in that thing. And you do that right up until launch. And then you spent 2 weeks on orbit, and suddenly you weren't current anymore. And so we didn't, as a general rule, we didn't hand fly it until Mach 1. But at Mach 1, we would take over manually and hand fly it from there on down, so that the commander had his stick time back and got current again, coming down around the heading alignment circle and lining up in the pattern. And if the pilot on the right side, who's kind of the co-pilot, we call him the pilot opposed to the commander, if he was really good and had done a really good job on the mission so far, the commander might give him 10 seconds of stick time.
And you talk about the pattern, which is obviously the British circuit. I'm imagining the space shuttle pattern is quite large.
Well, it's large vertically, Ed. So I'd put someone in the right seat or in the left seat, and I'd be in the right seat in the simulator. I'd say, now we're going to fly this big sweeping turn. We're going to cross over the midfield or cross over the field at 50,000 feet at Mach 1. Yeah. And then you're going to swing out onto this and get onto this circle. So basically you join up at low key, and you're at 30,000 feet when you're at low key. Then 20,000 feet we're in the middle of what we call a base leg, and you'd intercept final at about 12,000 feet. The truth of the matter is, we call this big sweeping turn. You're really just falling down this spiral. We didn't need that big of a restricted area laterally, because you were dropping into this thing. Imagine 55,000 feet over the field and landing in about 3 minutes, or 4 minutes. So you needed a lot of vertical space, but not a lot of horizontal space, and the wings were there basically to flare. I mean, at 55,000 feet, you could put it in a steep bank and pull, and it just keep going in the direction you were going because there was no air to grab.
Can you side slip it?
You could, but as a rule, the computer was controlling it. And when you're coming down at 10,000 feet a minute, you really don't want to increase the sink rate.
Well, it might be a little bit high.
And so, with all the training that goes on, was it something that always worked out exactly as everyone wanted it to, or
it always operated within the parameters that we wanted to operate in, with the exception of our 2 vehicles that we lost. I'm sure some of you are glider pilots, and a lot of your listeners are glider pilots. This is a heavy glider, is what we called it, coming downhill. And so you'd basically fly it with the speed brakes at about 40%, maybe 50%, so that if you ended up going low, you could close the speed brakes up. If you were a little hot, you could open the speed brakes more. So your speed brake was like a throttle in that regard. And so, yes, you could increase the sink rate if you wanted, but you could decrease it by closing the speed brakes up.
Right. Okay. And in terms of speeds, I know that the last kind of 60 seconds of the flight, what sort of numbers were you talking?
Sure. So you're coming down final at 297 knots. Right. And it was always funny to put a regular pilot in the shuttle simulator and give them one landing, because quite frequently they just flew it straight into the ground. What you do is you came down a 19-degree glide slope at 297 knots. And at about 2,000 feet, you did what was called a pre-flare maneuver. So you did, and on the primary final, you were aimed short of the runway by about a mile, 2 miles. So you're actually, if you'd lawn dart straight into the, short of the runway. At 2,000 feet, you'd do a 1.4 G pull onto a half-degree glide slope. So then you'd cross the threshold at about 260 knots, and then you'd set up for landing on this half-degree glide slope. At which point, at the end of that pre-flare is what we called it, you really wanted to be in an attitude where you could just touch down. Because if you started playing with it, because of the delta wing, the elevon pitch control, you were very likely to get into a pilot-induced oscillation. The problem is that it was as if the pitch axis of rotation was 160 feet in front of the nose. So if you give a little pitch up, the immediate reaction was the pilot would feel a sink in the seat of their pants, because the elevons go up, it kills some lift. Yes, it pitches up, but it took a while for that airflow, the angle of attack, to take over and actually increase your lift. So you could very easily, you'd pitch up a little bit, you'd feel the increase in sink, which is the opposite of what you wanted, and you'd go, oh, and you'd push forward, and now you're galloping down the runway. Yeah. So you really wanted to come out of that pre-flare maneuver in that sweet spot. So you just fly down that half-degree glide slope, decelerating, and touch down at about 205 knots. That's it. Very simple.
So touchdown 205 knots, which seems, and after your approach speed of 297, that seems positively slow.
Yeah, I mean, after a while, you just got so used to it that any other airplane you fly, things really happen slowly.
Yeah. Were there any glider pilots within the shuttle pilot cohort?
Oh, almost everybody in test pilot school got to go get a few hours of glider time. So there were guys. There weren't that many who flew gliders recreationally that I'm aware of. Probably a couple of guys. We had two kinds of pilots. We had the ones who grew up on their dad's grass strip with their Cub and their Cherokees and their Cessnas and the like, and they'd been flying since they were 12. And then we had the guys who'd never touched an airplane until they got into the military flight training program and burned kerosene their entire careers. And they were all good, but the guys I like to hang out with were the ones who grew up on their dad's grass strip, because I started flying when I was 13, and we all had that shared experience. So it was fun to go up in a J3 with a shuttle commander I had a J3 for 10 years, and they kind of like, hey, Paul, can I go flying in your airplane? We go, yeah, we go out and just shoot some landings. I know Ed's smiling because I know you got a Cub. And it's just aviation. We love it.
And I'm guessing that'll be guys like Hoot Gibson.
Oh yeah. Hoot had a J3. He and a couple of guys had a J3, like I had a J3 with a couple of guys, and Hoot would fly anything, anytime, anywhere. It was just a lot of fun.
Any other, besides Hoot, were there any other kind of stick and rudder guys who were shuttle pilots?
Yeah, but now you're going to make me remember names.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we had a lot of good guys. Joe Engel was a heck of a stick. Still is. I don't think Joe's passed away yet. I'd have to go check the obituaries. But Bill Anders, who we lost last week, I never really met Bill until after my NASA career, when we would show up at the same fly-ins and the like. And he was just a fun guy who liked airplanes.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of great aviators in the program.
Yeah. There's a few questions coming through. Adrian Norris says, if the pilot was incapacitated, could the landing be flown automatically? Or I guess there was also quite a few people on the crew who maybe could have taken over.
Well, the truth of the matter is you could fly auto land all the way to touchdown, and it would do auto braking as well. The problem we had is that one time out of every 10,000 in the simulator, the auto land would do something that we didn't like. And so we really didn't trust it in that regard. And you didn't want to be taking over in the flare in this airplane that was easy to PIO. And that's where we always hand flew it from Mach 1 down. But you could auto land it. And I'll give you the short story that if I was giving a demo ride in the shuttle simulator to somebody really, really important, like a senator or congressman or somebody who could affect our funding, or a prince or a king or a president from somewhere, and I wanted them to leave feeling really good about themselves, I just tell them, now, this aircraft is really, really sensitive, so you need very, very small stick motions to fly it. Now, just look at the HUD there and make sure that you put the little diamond on top of the little circle with the wings and the tail and just follow it down. And so they'd fly it very, very gently and very, very small stick motions, and they'd get a perfect landing. And what I didn't tell them is that if they didn't move the stick by 2 degrees, it stayed in auto. They left feeling very good about themselves, and that was the important part.
Definitely. Dan Smith says, Paul, did you ride the Gulfstream at any time?
Yes. Yeah. It's an interesting ride.
Yeah, as exciting as it looks. We should have got a picture. I'm sure most people have seen it, but it is just crazily steep.
And what's most interesting and terrifying is the nose gear is retracted.
So is there a short final checklist? It's like,
well, you never actually, and when you were in sim mode, you didn't actually touch down. You did a simulated touchdown at a height where the pilot's eyes were at the height that the shuttle would be, and so the Gulfstream was still 20 feet in the air.
Okay, yeah. Going back to, we talked a bit about landing. In terms of launch, was there any difference between night and day launches? And someone's asked about it in the comments, but they've said, there were European emergency landing sites for the shuttle? Is it? Someone mentions Manston. I think someone else has mentioned Machrihanish, Fairford, and Manston also. What was kind of key in the launch kind of aspect of the shuttle?
Well, so one of the things about the shuttle is that you had a lot of potential aborts. For the first 4 minutes, if you had a problem, you could abort back to the Cape. It was a maneuver called the Return to Launch Site Abort, or RTLS, which John Young described as, you can make it work if you have 100 consecutive miracles followed by an act of God. That would make it work. We flew it all the time. I flew it all the time in the simulators, and it was quite exciting, and you had to be very precise and nail it. But after that 4.5 minutes, you had too much energy to get back to the Cape, too much forward velocity. And so then you'd sometimes have a short gap where you couldn't go anywhere but the ocean, but very short. And then after that, you could start picking up landing sites on the continent. I don't remember any in England. There might have been some in our guidebook, but your capability to go there would have been a matter of seconds because you're accelerating so fast. So Spain, North Africa, and Dakar were a couple of ours that we had in the books. And then and you got to realize that the whole ascent phase, the whole launch phase lasted 8.5 minutes. to go from from a standing start to 25,000 feet per second. And so after you were going too fast to make the abort sites in Africa, you'd then be able to abort once around, which would be landing on the west coast of the U.S., or a couple seconds later, you had the capability to abort into orbit. So the short answer is that England was probably too short to actually need it. But we had this big thick book. It's in my closet. Otherwise, I'd go get it and wave it around. Called the Maps and Charts book, and it basically had every 10,000 foot or 12,000 foot runway that we could use anywhere under the ground track of the orbiter. And some of them, they had NOTAMs on them that said, yes, you can land here, but the people are unfriendly. So think about if you really want to land there.
Yeah, definitely. And was there any difference, apart from being truly spectacular, launching at night versus launching at day?
Truly spectacular, but from a standpoint of trajectories, no.
No.
You know, you trained day, night as required, and frankly, at night the guys said that there was so much light coming off of the boosters that it was like day, anyways.
Wow. And in terms of return, going back to the return,
yes,
it was either Edwards or Kennedy Space Center, wasn't it?
The return to launch site was Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah,
and that was a pretty exciting maneuver to do, because you're going away from the Cape at 7,000 feet per second, Mach 7, and you got to get turned around and coming back towards the Cape with enough energy and altitude to make it back. So you had to be very precise to make that work, and that was the criteria to fly the shuttle motion-based simulator in Houston, was that you had to be able to demonstrate that you could do an RTLS manually solo in order to get signed off to fly the thing solo, the simulator solo.
Yeah,
we only had one, and we didn't want to break it.
Is this? We've got a photo of you. Is this you in the simulator?
Yeah, yep. That was me during one of the very fast last shuttle generic sims. I doubled as a flight director and a commander during the last couple of years of generic simulations. We ran out of astronauts who would help us do our generic simulations for flight controller training. And so we formed crews that we called ourselves the Astronauts, NOTS. So it was a great time, because I'd spend a day in the control center as a flight director. I'd spend a day in the cockpit as a commander. I'd spend another day in the control center doing evaluations or teaching. And then I just had to figure out how to stay out of the office for 2 more days, and the week was over. It was great.
And just looking at that panel, did the shuttle ever have any, we all love an EFIS, did it ever get any upgrades during its life?
Yeah, we started off with steam gauges, and they were wonderfully built steam gauges. A lot of them came out of the Valkyrie program, the XB-70 program. But we ran into a case where all the guys who knew how to fix all the little watchmakers who knew how to fix those things and keep them running, they hadn't just retired; they'd all died. I mean, they were gone. So that's when we had to upgrade to a glass cockpit. The fun thing about that picture is you see the little Westac timers, those little timers up on the glare shield. We bought those by the gross. They're $12.95 a piece on Amazon, and we'd buy them by the gross and certify them and stick Velcro on them, and we had them all over the cockpit. We'd fly with a couple dozen of them so that you could just start a timer anywhere you needed, because with all that computing power, the EFIS and everything, we didn't just have the easy capability to set a timer and just a countdown timer.
Yeah. So that must have been the cheapest component in the shuttle. It was enabled.
That or the government pencils with a piece of Velcro stuck on the back. We didn't fly space pens as a rule. We just used pencils.
Okay. Yeah. And talking of things that go into space. One of the questions Johnny's put on the sheet: what memorabilia? Have you got any memorabilia that went into space?
None within easy reach, but I've got a lot of it. I've got bits and pieces of tile, and I've got nuts and bolts, and I've got got a flight data file, checklists that flew in space and things like that. So, and lots of patches and stickers, lots of patches that have flown in space and come back, and flags and things like that. So yeah, we got boxes of them, and who knows what will happen to them at some point. They're just sitting in boxes.
Brilliant. What I heard a story that you mentioned, an anecdote about a Capcom console fire. So, from a theoretical point of view, what happens if the fire alarm goes off in mission control and everybody has to get out?
Well, we actually had a contingency plan where we would, if we lost the control center for some reason, we could put everybody on a KC-135 at our Ellington Airport facility, which was about a 20-minute drive away. We had everything packed, ready to go. We'd put them on a KC-135 and fly everybody to the Cape, where we would activate the launch control center at the Cape as a mission control. And we demonstrated the ability to do that within 3 hours. We could evacuate mission control in Houston and have everybody in the control center in the Cape in 3 hours and talk to the crew again.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of the fun little trips I got to set up and take, because we had this on the books, and we said, well, we've never tested it. Well, I said, let's go try it. So we cranked up a sim and declared an emergency, and everybody ran out, got on the KC, and flew to the Cape, and it was great. It was fun. Had a big party that night at one of the tropical hotels, afterwards.
Very good. Crispin Horsfield asked the question, is there any likelihood of there being a next generation shuttle, do you think, in the foreseeable future?
I think there's a very good chance that there will be, considering that there's one already at the Cape getting ready to launch. Now, it's a private contractor, and it's Sierra Nevada that has developed it. And right now it's unmanned, but they're talking about flying it manned. So there is that capability. We've kind of gone back to ballistic trajectories for now. Elon's rocket, Orion, they're all ballistic, and they work. They just don't have that capability to bring about a lot of stuff back. Yeah. A lot of big stuff back.
Johnny, you had a question about Artemis, I think, didn't you?
Yeah. So from we don't see a huge amount of it in the news over here, but from a perspective of Artemis, is it a case that it will happen whatever it takes, or could politics get in the way and ruin a return to the moon?
That's the really nice thing, Johnny, is I sit here, I've been retired for 11 years, and I just watch the news like you do. I mean, I have a few inside channels and the like, and the folks are working on Artemis. But the problem that happens is technology moves so fast that I'm worried that Artemis is obsolete already and it hasn't even flown. And that's kind of what happens, that you develop this great big system, but somebody else slides along behind and comes in with a simpler system. Elon is doing that pretty well, but we'll see. Elon was chosen, the SpaceX was chosen as the landing to develop the lander for the moon, and I'm not quite sure how he's getting there. I just haven't seen the actual concept yet that says make it work. I remember a satellite payload I was supposed to carry to orbit one time, and they called it Inspector, and they were going to go up and snoop around other satellites. And they gave me this little cartoon PowerPoint that they were going to just fly up there, and then they were going to fly around. I said, what kind of sensors do you have? Well, we're going to look at it with TV cameras. I said, I think you need to go back and study this a little more, because it's a little more complicated than you think.
So, Paul, you went from being at NASA to becoming editor of Kitplanes magazine.
Yes.
That's a complete change of life. And
well, I was writing for Kitplanes while I was at NASA for a couple of years. And when I retired, they said, hey, we'd like to be editor-in-chief of the magazine. And I said, I don't know anything about putting out a magazine. They said, that's okay. You understand experimental aviation really well. That's what we want. We've got people who can edit stuff. And so it's been a pleasure, because I got to go everywhere and fly all sorts of really cool airplanes. And as you guys know, you get to, somebody calls you up and says, hey, we got this new model coming out. Would you come and fly it and evaluate it for us? And I do a number of different things in that regard. I evaluate for the magazine. I sometimes evaluate privately for companies. I test airplanes. I do first flights for people in their new experimentals. And now I'm a designated airworthiness representative for the FAA, so I can license airplanes here in the U.S. So I'm pretty deeply involved in it. And I've been flying my whole life. So even when I was at NASA, I did have some restrictions placed on me, my flying just before a mission. If I was critical to the mission and no one else was, and I didn't have a real backup, they asked me to not do any private flying for a period of time before the flight. But as a rule, it's really been a ball. And then, I ran Kitplanes as editor-in-chief for about 6.5 years. And as you guys know, the real problem with being editor-in-chief is when you're doing a monthly magazine, they expect you to do one every single month, and it gets really hard. And so I engineered the return of Mark Cook to be editor-in-chief, and they made me editor-at-large. So now I get to go all over and just do the articles that I want to do and test the airplanes I want to test, and it's a lot of fun.
And you obviously love building. You've built an RV8. Dream Tundra, an RV3. But I'm sure probably what our viewers will be most interested in is your subsonics.
Yes, the little jet. I really enjoy flying the little jet. I've got about 200 hours on it. It's both extremely simple and at the same time very demanding to fly from a standpoint of you need to be on top of it. You need to be, you're sitting out in front of the wings. You're hand flying it all the time. There's no autopilot. It's just a really cool machine to go and stay current in because it keeps me sharp. You don't have a lot of fuel. You've got 2 hours of fuel. So you have to be thinking all the time about where you're going to be going and where you're going to be landing. And if there's something happening at your destination airport, you need to select your alternate early. So I really enjoy flying the little subsonics. In about 100 hours, we're going to have to send that motor back to the Czech Republic for an overhaul. Ooh. And nobody knows what that's going to cost.
Will it cost less than buying a new engine?
We're not sure of that.
And it's what power is the engine?
It's 257 pounds of thrust, and they tell us that you can get 300 pounds of thrust out of it with this simple reprogramming of the FADEC. But the downside is that it becomes a single-use engine. One start, one stop, 1 hour flight time.
Yeah, that's not so good. Pete Pengelly obviously knows a little bit about your building history. How's your electric airplane going?
Oh yeah, we have an electric motor glider that we built. We took and built a Xenos motor glider and put an electric motor on it. It has it's out of phase one. I fly it once every couple of weeks. It's not a spectacular soaring airplane, let's put it that way. And so most of the time, if I'm thermaling, I have the motor running at 10-20% power just to up the glide ratio a little bit. But it flies, and the power plant, the electric part, has been absolutely flawless. I mean, you turn it on, you move the throttle forward, and the prop spins, and away you go.
And
a lot of fun.
I think I'm right in
we have a gravel pit off the end of our runway.
Yeah,
the
electric motor is it's evolved from a motorcycle, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. We bought a zero motorcycle and tore out the power system. And then there's a fellow over here in California, Gabe DeVault, that designed a redrive for it. And it's just a really amazingly simple little power plant to fly. I enjoy the fact that there's no pre-flight checklist. You taxi it out to the runway and you wiggle the stick to make yourself feel good. But aside from that, just push the throttle forward and away you go.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just going to round out with a couple more questions. Just going back on the shuttle stuff. Harry Scott says, "What was your happiest moment in NASA?"
Oh golly, there were an awful lot of happy moments. Every time you docked with a space station or deployed a satellite or did anything spectacular like that, it was very, very happy. I think to be sitting in the control center with a great team of people, a shuttle on orbit, a complex mission going on, and you just sit there and realize how good everybody is, and that you're privileged to sit there and work, to be given the opportunity to work with them and have those people working with you is just an incredibly happy moment.
Fantastic. And also from Harry, what was the hardest decision you ever had to make?
Oh, golly. Leaving NASA was pretty tough because there's an awful lot of really cool things going on. And I retired from the agency when I was 55. I would say that the thing people don't really realize is that we trained constantly and we were simming all the time. And so all of the really bad stuff that happened to us was in the sims, in the simulators, with failures flying left and right and all that stuff. So that once you got on orbit, when you got on in flight, the really bad things didn't happen. Or if they did, we lost the vehicle twice. But the really challenging things that you remember were in simulations, not in flight.
Yeah. On a more global view, Keir Williams says, "What's your favorite airplane that you built?"
Oh man, you're going to get me in so much trouble.
Obviously, some of these have been with your wife, Louise, haven't they?
Yes, I do have to say that since I have to stay friends with all of the kit manufacturers and all the kit companies, I will say that airplanes are all built for different purposes. I love flying my RV3 as an aerobatic airplane, as a light airplane, as a cross-country airplane, but I would rather be flying a purpose-built bush plane if I'm going into a small strip in the backcountry. So, favorite airplane depends upon what I'm doing with it at the moment, and that's about as diplomatic as I can be.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And I'm really looking forward to this rocket because it's basically the size and shape of an RV-8, but instead of 180 horsepower, it's got 260. Hence the name Rocket.
Okay, and is that going to be your last project, or never say never?
Never say never, but you always want to build it as best you can because you never know when it could be your last one. There are two things that can happen to a pilot. One is that he goes out knowing that it's his last flight, and the other thing is going out to a flight and not knowing that it's going to be his last flight. So I have a superstition. I never say, well, this is going to be my last landing. I mean, I'll go out and I'll shoot landings and I'll say, I think I'll stop with that one. That was a good one.
Very good. Paul, it's been fantastic talking to you. We're going to have to wrap the interview up, but hopefully you can stay around and watch us on Fancy Hangar and maybe pop back in and just be the voice of judgment. I think you'll like the topic. So
all right, I'll stick around.
Excellent. Well, I now feel I could tackle the shuttle, at least for the last few seconds. What a great guest. So inspired by Paul's appearance on the show, we thought we'd pick aircraft from NASA's long and wildly varied history. Will someone have picked the Cirrus SR-22? Amazingly, I kid you not, there is one of those on their current fleet. Who's next? So who's first?
Well, you decided.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, Dave, you can be first.
Right. Well, Paul mentioned it, so I've gone for the North American XB-70 Valkyrie.
Wow.
Originally conceived as a high-altitude nuclear strike bomber that could fly at Mach 3, it was to replace the very old-fashioned B-52. 6 engines, delta wing with some interesting dynamics to help it surf the shockwave generated off the aircraft's nose. However, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, came along and made such an aircraft less attractive. However, NASA persevered, as you can see here, made a few tweaks, which included adding 5 degrees of dihedral to the wings. That kind of tamed the handling a bit, and it achieved Mach 3 in 1966. It's used for tests and is now at the National Museum of the United States Air Force near Dayton, Ohio. Should they ever be persuaded to let me put it in my fancy hangar, I could have the ride as a Valkyrie.
Wow. Oh, very good. I see what you did there. That's very good. And Annabelle, what's your choice?
My choice is the Bell X1. The X-1, nicknamed Glamorous Glennis and flown by Chuck Yeager, was the first piloted aircraft to exceed the speed of sound on level flight and change the entire future of aviation. On the 14th of October 1947, Chuck and Glennis were dropped from the bomb bay of a B-29 over the Mojave Desert, reached Mach 1.06. Not only did this prove that controlled supersonic flight was possible, but also that the human body could travel that fast without injury. And this was a massive step towards spaceflight. It must have been also hugely inspirational to a new generation of pilots and engineers. So I think it's safe to say that the Bell X-1 changed history. It was also the first of the X-planes, establishing the concept of pure research aircraft. And with a fuselage model on a 50 caliber Browning machine gun bullet and a rocket engine, it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, and probably the only aeroplane in the NASA inventory with a broom handle. That was a key part of the Mach 1 flight, because I think Yeager fell off a horse, I think the night before or not long before the flight took place, and couldn't. His arm was injured, and one of the actions was to reach across and close the hatch, and he couldn't. He just didn't have the strength to do that. And his crew chief at the time kind of looked at some brooms and went snap, stuck it in the handle, and went, "Here we go. Here's your lever." So,
Do you know, I wish I'd known that before, because I fell off a horse and I lost my medical for 2 years.
oh, you
I
just
should have
needed.
just gone to the CAA and said, "Look, I've got a broom handle. It's all going to be fine."
You just needed a broom. That was all. So, Johnny, what's your choice?
Right, so I've gone for something that, compared to everybody else, I think, knowing what Ed's picked, I think I've picked the most practical airplane from the four of us. Not that the F-15 could ever be described as practical, but
We've talked about this not being practical, Hangar, before, I think.
Okay.
in the context of this, I think it is. So this is 836, which is the oldest and apparently fastest F-15 in the world, which is taken on by NASA in 1993. It was made lighter, equipped with more modern engines, so it could easily exceed Mach 2. And it's been used for various experiments, including sonic boom suppression, airflow efficiency, and supports the X-59 project to measure and reduce sonic booms. But as an F-15 is a cool airplane, in military color schemes, they're dumbed down a bit. I think in a NASA color scheme, it looks fantastic.
I have to say, I wasn't aware of that aeroplane until you brought it to my attention, and you go, a civilian F-15 or a civilian painted F-15, that looks brilliant. I really like that idea. So I'd like to think that when we go back to Paul, he'll go, "Oh yeah, no, we could have a go in anything of stuff like that." So I could fly that anytime. So that just leaves me, and it was kind of an easy one for me. It's been a pick for other people in the past here on Fancy Hangar. I opted for the Space Shuttle for so many reasons you heard about tonight. It's just plain awesome. And having stood in the presence of the shuttle Discovery in the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, I know it would be one of the ultimate parts in my fancy hangar. And having seen one up close, you realise that they look like these kind of beautiful shiny white things, but then you realise that the fuselage is like blanket type material and stuff, and it's much more raw in person. So let's get Paul back in, because crucially, we'll give him a Paul. Have you got a favourite out of those?
I like them all. I think they're awesome airplanes, really, all of them, and they all have a really important piece of history. But I have to lean towards your choice, Ed. You know, I'm kind of an honorary mascot of the Blackbird Society, the folks who flew the SR-71, and we get together once every year here in Reno at a convention, and we're going this next Saturday, and they'll be talking about Mach 3, you know, Mach 3.1 and 3, and I just walk them and I say, guys, Mach 25, just saying. And I walk away. So yeah, it's hard to beat the Space Shuttle as the fastest, highest flying aircraft ever built.
So I think on that basis, I'm not. We'll leave people to run through the comments, but I think on that basis, for once, we will go Paul wins, because that is definitely a win, a winning comment. Dave, have you got any events for us?
Yep, it's not a busy weekend, but some key events are Friday to Sunday. There's a Draycott aerodrome flying. Draycott's just south of Swindon. Over in the east coast, there's summer solstice flying at North Reps. That's near Cromer. The west coast, down in the southwest, the LAA Devon Strut flying at Faraway Common. They finally got good weather. And also with good weather, summer flying at Easter Airfield up on the east coast of Scotland. And that is Easter Airfield, picture posted by them earlier this week.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So just remains for me to say thank you, Annabelle, for joining us and standing in for Ian and not touching any buttons and breaking things like you might have done. Paul, thank you for being a tremendous guest. Lots of comments saying how much people have enjoyed that in the comments. Long may you continue to build more aeroplanes and enjoy flying, and we will see you around. Everyone else, thank you for joining us, and join us obviously for Livestream Extra next Wednesday at 3:00, or obviously for regular Livestream 7:30 next Thursday. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Paul, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.